Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Together, please. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nas Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest. One should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Pareshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees. All that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed in loving service under the personality of Godhead. Irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Timarandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes to the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Mukam Karti Vachalam Bangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinatarane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, the deliverer of the fallen souls. His mercy turns the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross mountains. All right, so we're going to read 4 verses this morning. Yesterday was kind of like a rainstorm of metaphors, wasn't it? We're going to hear all of those analogies. There must be 40 or 50 of them in this chapter. Metaphors, rather. So today we're going to, for the next few days, we get to just focus on a few at a time, which is really nice. So today we have 4, starting with text 9. So why don't we just take them one at a time rather than reading all of them together. Okay. In fact, why don't we do the Sanskrit for this one, since that's our starting point. Is that right? Okay. Shrutva parjanya ninadam Manduka sasri jurgira Tushnim shayana pragyadvad Brahmana niyamat yaye Shrutva parjanya nindadam Manduka sasri jurgira Tushnim shayana pragyadvad Brahmana niyamat yaye Sutva Nidanyanim Adam Manduka Sasrijur Gira Sushnim Sayana Pragyadvad Brahmana Niyamat Yaye Manduka Sasri Churgira Tushnim Shayana Pragyadvad Brahmana Niyamat Maye Shrutva Parjanya Nidadam Manduka Sasri Jurgira Sushnim Shayana Pragyadvat Brahmana Niyamat Yaye Shrutva Parjanya Nidnadam Manduka Sasriju Gira Tushnim Shayana Prakyadvat Brahmana Niyamatyaye Shrutva Parjanya Nidnadam Manduka Sasriju Gira Yadvat Brahmana Yamatyaye. Very nice. Synonyms together, please. Shrutva, hearing. Parjanya, of the rain clouds. Ninadam, the resounding. Manduka, the frogs. Sasriju, emitted. Yira, their sounds. Tushnim, silently. Shayana, lying. Prak, previously. Yadvat, just as. Brahmana students, niyama atyaye, after finishing their morning duties. And translation together. The frogs, who had all along been lying silent, suddenly began croaking when they heard the rumbling of the rain clouds. In the same way, the students, who performed their duties in silence, began reciting their lessons when called on by their teacher. Okay, who'd like to read the purport? The short commentary here. Anyone? Oh, okay. I saw him first.
Srila Prabhupada comments, after the first rainfall, when there is a thundering sound in the clouds, all the frogs begin to croak, like students suddenly engaged in reading their studies. Students are generally supposed to rise early in the morning. They do not usually rise of their own accord, however, but only when there is a bell sounded in the temple or other spiritual institution. By the order of the spiritual master, they immediately rise, and after finishing their morning duties, they sit down to study the Vedas or chant Vedic mantras. Everyone is sleeping in the darkness of Kali Yuga, but when there is a great Acharya, by his calling, only everyone takes to the study of the Vedas to acquire actual knowledge.
All right, so I have a dear friend named Mahavishnu Goswami, who is an elder Gujarati gentleman from London, became a devotee there and then a sannyasi and spiritual master. And he was a very jovial fellow. And I liked him very much because he liked my poetry. He liked to read my poetry, and he encouraged me to write more. And he said, this is your unique talent. He said, everyone has their own unique talent, like the frog. The frog can live in the mud for months and years, like in more or less a coma, but then they come out when the rain comes. So I was very pleased to be compared to a frog in this way. It was empowering. So everybody has their own special talent and way of pleasing Krishna. So the frogs have this remarkable ability. They can just stay dormant when it's dry. They don't die, but they don't do anything. They just are more or less still. But when the rains come, all of a sudden they all come out. So where I live in Florida, where our property backs up to a swamp. And swamps are areas that sometimes wet, sometimes dry. So when it's dry, it's very quiet and peaceful. But when it rains and the ground becomes moistened and puddles form, then the frogs come out in force. And they start croaking so loudly. It's very pleasant to me. One of my godbrothers, so Hridananda Maharaj, was working on this commentary on Bhagavatam back in the 1980s or so. And he lived in a rural place next to a pond. So this pond was a full-time pond. It had many frogs, but it also had many snakes, a certain kind of snake called a cottonmouth, which has a rather nasty venomous bite. So his disciples, not wanting him to be bothered by any threat from these snakes, waded out and caught bunches of them and took them over to some neighbor's pond. So it was a very devotional act. However, as a result of the absence of the snakes, the frogs multiplied without inhibition. And so the noise from the frogs became so loud that they had to put up insulation in his room because he could hardly sleep. They would be croaking so loudly. So the analogy is given, or the metaphor is given here, that the frogs are very quiet in the dry season. But now, as described in this chapter, the rainy season is coming, and the frogs all come out. I have seen this, experienced it, and as have others. Do you have frogs up this far north? No. It's too cold for them, I think. Yeah, they are. They're reptiles, which means that they are subject to the temperature around them. So, anyway, this is a phenomenon. Trust me, it does exist. And so here, the rumbling of the rain clouds causes them to come out. Not even the rain itself, just hearing the sound makes them come to life. So in the same way, Paka devotee students are very quiet in the morning. There is a saying in English that students should be seen but not heard, or young people, right? So some years ago, there was an artist in the White House in America, the president's residence, who painted a portrait of the current president. His name was Peter Hurd. And the president did not like the portrait. So it was announced that in the White House, artists should be seen but not heard. Hurd was his name. Okay, anyway, it's a good joke. So the beauty of brahmachari or brahmacharini life is that there's no other responsibilities to really distract one from studying and learning, as much as possible. Not always possible, completely, but most of the time. And whatever investment we can make in our studies just pays dividends for the rest of our lives, our spiritual studies, just as you learn a trade in school, and then you can use that professionally. So in the same way, in a much deeper way, actually, you learn these timeless mantras and timeless shlokas and timeless teachings, and if you can internalize them, bring them into your heart, they just set your life on a whole different course than it would have taken. And those slokas that you remember become your lifelong friends. So the tradition is that students would just be very focused on studies. They would just learn mantras. In fact, before Kali Yuga, the whole tradition was passed down by oral repetition. So students would be expected to memorize vast swaths of slokas. Even in India today, you have families that are named Ekvedi, Dvivedi, Trivedi, Chaturvedi, right? That their family heritage was that their ancestors would memorize 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the Vedas. Not an light task. Some of my godbrothers and godsisters have memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit, 700 verses, but it's a big endeavor. And those are very gifted people in that particular way. But Srila Prabhupada said if we could just learn 20 slokas, some of his young Western disciples were going to introduce ISKCON in South India, this very traditional part of the country, and they felt a little intimidated. How could we possibly present Bhagavad Gita to these scholars? Srila Prabhupada assured them, if you know 20 verses from Bhagavad Gita, you can teach anywhere in the world. So this is the time when students imbibe, memorize, and commit themselves to study as a long-term investment in life. And therefore, traditionally, they're very quiet until they're called on, and then they recite their lessons. So, any questions about this or any comments? It's a nice analogy.
Frogs, the way they croak during the rainy season, that's out of joy. And when students recite the verses, it's out of duty, out of fear of the teacher.
Actually, no, it's not out of joy. It's out of mating. It's a mating call. Oh, they're just looking there. The bullfrogs are saying, "Here I am." Boop, 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 boop. So this is a different motivation.
And also, as you mentioned, that brahmachari's life, I mean, you don't have any other stress. But in today's world, even if you are not married, still you have a lot of responsibilities
Mhm.
and you don't have the free mindset to focus on spiritual stuff.
Right. This is explained in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya kipadrita. That in the Kali Yuga, everyone's mind is always disturbed. So yes, we don't have traditional brahmachari environments where there's really little to do but study. Okay? When Srila Prabhupada introduced ISKCON in 1966, he suggested that the devotees should chant 64 rounds a day, because that would be the standard in the mats in India. So, in response, his young disciple said, "Don't think that's possible. That would be 8 hours of chanting." You see, in the temples, traditionally, the students would live and they would have very minimal duties except to study under the tutelage of the guru. Just some cleaning, some cooking, some begging alms. A very simple life. So chanting 64 rounds was a natural thing to do. You have many hours every day. And then so Prabhupada said, all right, 32 rounds. Devotees said, I don't think we can do that. So then he said, all right, 16 rounds, but no less. So that's where this standard comes from, adapted for the very passionate West in which we live. So, but that has proven successful. 16 rounds will vaccinate us, it will insulate us, even though we have to interact with the world so much. We don't have that, what is the word, when you are secluded, anyway, there's somewhere that's escaping my mind right now, but very secluded life where you're separated, cloistered is the word, cloistered existence in a monastery or an ashram. We don't have that. We are full on dealing with people, and so that's why the morning hours are so very valuable, to invest in our chanting, to invest in our study, so that we're getting the best, giving the best part of our day to the most important thing. So it's not surprising, and we're adapting, because Krishna consciousness is ecstatic. It's not static, like it's always the same. It's ecstatic. It is adapting, it is flowing, it's changing, it is applying the same eternal teachings according to the time and circumstance. Okay? You can still memorize 20 verses, in other words. Okay. Have you done that already?
I'm not 20, but just yes.
But you've done some. What's your favorite verse from the Gita?
I have this kind of,
No.
these are the verses that I have.
Okay, one that you memorized.
The one that I really like is Matras Prashasta Kante. Because those waves kind of, come, and then you feel like, everything is kind of, it's not possible, and then you feel like, no, it's going to pass.
Very good. Can you recite the whole verse in Sanskrit?
I'll kind of try. Matras Prashasta Kante, Shitoshna Sukha Dukkha.
Agama.
Apna,
Okay, that's all right. You'll learn when you're giving lectures, you can just say one line of the verse and kind of imply you know the whole thing. So you did too, that's good. Agama payano nityas tam statikshashva varata. Yes, very good. So when we memorize a verse, we create neural pathways in our brain. That's why it's so hard. You're actually reprogramming your brain manually. Some people have a great aptitude and can do it easily. Others, it's a real struggle. But 20 is the minimum goal, according to Prabhupada. Yes, Prabhu?
Could it be any 20, Prabhu, or specific ones that Prabhupada?
There are lists of verses that Prabhupada quoted most often. So that's a good place to start. Yeah. There are verses that are more applicable than others in introducing Krishna consciousness. That's a very good one. What are some other ones? Patram pushpam palam toyam. Offer me a leaf, fruit, or flower. What else? Dehinos menjatadehe, probably the first place to start for most people. That as the embodied soul continues, changes from boyhood to youth, old age, the soul similarly changes into a new body at death. All right, let's move on. Text 10. Let's just read the translation. Oh, okay. Please hold the question. We'll get back to that. Okay. Let's just read this translation together, please. With the advent of the rainy season, the insignificant streams, which had become dry, began to swell and then strayed from their proper courses like the body, property, and money of a man, controlled by the urges of his senses. Okay, who'd like to read the purport? Vaishnavis, please go ahead.
Shri Prabhupada comments, during the rainy season, many small ponds, lakes, and
Rivulets.
rivulets become filled with water.
Mhm.
Otherwise, the rest of the year, they remain dry. Similarly, materialistic persons are dry, but sometimes when they are in a so-called opulent position, with a home or children or a little bank balance, they appear to be flourishing, but immediately afterwards, they become dry again. Like the small rivulets and ponds. The poet Vidyapati said that in the society of friends, family, children, wife, etc., there is certainly some pleasure, but that pleasure is compared to a drop of water in the desert. Everyone is hankering after happiness, just as in the desert, everyone is hankering after water. If in the desert there is a drop of water, it may of course be said that the water is there, but the benefit from that drop of water is very insignificant. In our materialistic way of life, which is just like a desert, we are hankering after an ocean of happiness. But in the form of society, friends, and mundane love, we are getting no more than a drop of water. Our satisfaction is never achieved, as the small rivulets, lakes, and ponds are never filled with water in the dry season.
Thank you. So again, when the monsoons come, all of these various bodies of water become recharged. I was just in Rishikesh a few days ago, and Rishikesh means the Ganga. You can see the Ganga. But when you drive into Rishikesh, you drive over these bridges, over these big, dry waterbeds. Has anyone ever been there? You seen this? You know what I'm talking about? And so when I was going the first time, is this the Ganga? It's totally dry here. It's a big expanse of dried up riverbed, right? So the analogy is that given that the person who strays from their vows and their proper course of action are like these streams that get over flooded in the rainy season. That swamp in the back of our house in Florida, it's dry most of the time, but one year it rained so hard that it became like a big lake and encroached on the edge of the property and flooded out our neighbor on the other side. He had to get his whole house basically redone. So a person whose senses are uncontrolled is compared to this. Do you ever have floods here in Toronto? You don't really have that problem sometimes? Yeah, some of the lower sea level cities like Miami are constantly dealing with seawater coming into the streets now, and it's only getting worse. So this is what happens when there's no adherence to principles and controlled behavior. So this world has become completely polluted by internal combustion engines. Actually, not only that, did you know, the United Nations did a study and discovered that the meat industry contributes more methane to global warming than all man's transportation combined. It's amazing, isn't it? People just are so abusive of the earth in all these ways, so we're getting this result. The normal expected boundaries are being transgressed. That's why we have 4 regulative principles in Krishna consciousness. One gentleman told me once, I know your 4 regulative principles: no meat, no fish, no eggs, and no onions. That's the 5th. Srila Prabhupada said, if I just eliminated these people like kirtan and they like deity worship, and he said, if I just eliminated these regulative principles, I can have millions of disciples. And indeed, that's what you see. We were talking yesterday about the glowworms, the fireflies of false teachers in Kali Yuga. So there are some very popular teachers with millions of followers, and they basically said, yes, you kind of do whatever you like, and I'll tell you some nice kata, and you give me some money. And this is the program. They've become very, very popular. Regulative principles are not popular, but they are like the side posts on the highway, that keep you from going off the edge. So they are called in the Bhagavad Gita the regulative principles of freedom. It's such a little thing to give up, really, these 4 things. Intoxication, gambling, illicit sex, and meat eating. It's just, okay. It's relatively modest, especially if you are fortunate to be brought up in an environment where these things are honored. But even if not, it's still a modest adjustment. And then there's this great joy that begins to permeate life. Why these 4 things? Because these are 4 things you can't offer to Krishna. Just about anything else you can do for Krishna. But these 4 things, just a few things you cannot do for Krishna. You cannot... Prabhupada said if Krishna ate meat, we'd offer him meat 3 times a day. Right? But he says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. He's just offer me these simple things. So, yes, any comments on this? Yes, Prabhu.
What does that begin to swell mean? It means
Yeah, it gets very big, yes. And then it overruns its course, its usual banks. Like the ocean generally stops at the beach, but when the glaciers melt and it rises even a little bit, then it creates havoc. And when the rains are very hard, sometimes rivers will just very quickly rise 10 or 20 feet. There was a girls' camp in Texas just a year or 2 ago, and because of these sudden heavy rains, all of a sudden there was this massive flood, and the camp was washed away, and 20 or 30 girls were killed, little girls, just because of the unexpected floods. So that's what it means. It swells and creates havoc. Anything else?
You mentioned the last point you mentioned about if Krishna was eating meat and we would offer meat 3 times a day. Often this debate happens about being vegan and being vegetarian or eating meat. Devotees often get in, and we also get the reason
Right.
that why you should not be eating meat. But usually that's not the first thing we say, that because Krishna doesn't. We usually give other reasons. It's not just because animals.
Yes, you see, these regulative principles have so many beneficial side effects. We're not vegetarians because it's better for our health, although it is, but we're vegetarians because Krishna's a vegetarian. See, Samsadhir Haritoshanam, like we were talking about yesterday, everything is done to please Krishna. Similarly, sex life is meant for procreation. And Krishna says in the Gita, Kamosmi Bharatar Shaba, I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. Contrary to religious principles means especially extramarital. So within the confines of marriage, for the purpose of procreation, that sex is Krishna. Intoxications cannot offer. Maybe you can offer to Lord Shiva some things. Is that some ganja? But Krishna does not need intoxication. So in this way. Okay. All right, let's read the next verse, number 11. Let's read together, please. The newly grown grass made the earth emerald green. The Indragopa insects added a reddish hue, and white mushrooms added further color and circles of shade. Thus the earth appeared like a person who has suddenly become rich. Srila Sridhar Swami comments that the word Rinam indicates men of the royal order. Thus the colorful display of dark green fields decorated with bright red insects and white mushroom umbrellas can be compared to a royal parade displaying the military strength of a king. Thus the earth appeared like a person who has suddenly become rich. Does anyone know anyone who has suddenly become rich? I don't think so.
yeah, no, not suddenly.
Yeah, suddenly. Yes.
Sudama.
Oh, Sudama. Okay, I was thinking personal friends, but that's a very elevated example. If I could just share with you a bit about my life and being on the other side of the hill, and you're all young people. My wife is a very nice devotee, very Brahminical, and I spent my early years, my years from 18 to 28 as a brahmachari. I sacrificed getting any education other than enrolling in UKC, the University of Krishna Consciousness. And so I really, when I married at 28, I really didn't have any marketable skills. I had no money, and we were just kind of starting out from scratch. So that's why it's so good today to help people become prepared to transition from single life to married life. But in any case, my wife and I lived in poverty for, I'm talking about U.S. standards of poverty. Our income was less than the U.S. standard of poverty for many, many years, for decades, really. And we never felt very inconvenienced. We had, I earned a modest living as a religious professional, which paid between $12,000 and $18,000 a year. We raised 3 children on that. What saved me was somehow we managed to buy a house. We bought a house instead of renting. And then that house appreciated. And then we sold it and we bought another house and it appreciated more. And then we sold that and bought another house which had some land on it that we subdivided, and to just kind of passively on the side, Krishna sent us ways to make money. We moved 13 times. My wife said we were professional movers. We would buy a house, move in, stay there for some years, let it appreciate in value, and then sell it and move, try to buy another house. So very unexpectedly, we got money. And so I always feel when I read a verse like this, that yes, if our purpose is serving Krishna, Krishna says, Tesham nityabhayuktanam yogakshemam vahamyam. I will carry what you lack and preserve what you have. So that isn't to say it's very good and responsible if you have a marketable skill and you earn money. That's the duty of the householder, ashram. So I kind of had this experience of not becoming rich, but becoming financially responsible after. If young people today did what my wife and I did, I would say you shouldn't do that. It's too much risk. But again, probably by Prabhupada's proximity, we were willing to take risks, and we just had so much confidence in what Prabhupada had done that we also experienced that to some little degree. All right. So any discussion on this before we do our last verse? Okay. So may you all be richer than I ever became. Then you can give me donations. Okay. And finally, text 12. We're 12 or 13 today, I think. What? Till 13. Okay, well, let's go on quickly. Together, please. With their wealth of grains, the fields gave joy to the farmers, but those fields created remorse in the hearts of those who were too proud to engage in farming and who failed to understand how everything is under control of the Supreme. We don't have time for the purport here, but just briefly, it's interesting, isn't it, this phrase, too proud to engage in farming. Has anyone heard of Varnashram Dharma? Okay. Would you like to hear something about Varnashram? So there was a history in our Sangha. Srila Prabhupada came to the West, and he saw the many cultural differences that existed in the West. So he adapted. He encouraged young men and women to take up Krishna consciousness. In India, women's having ashrams was very rare, but he said all of our temples should have ashrams for the ladies. And the first years, everybody was single. So everybody was enthusiastically teaching and practicing Krishna consciousness. The devotees who raised the money to buy this building, it's all young men and women, just out on the street, all year round, in the summer and the winter, selling books, collecting donations, raising the money. And Indresh's father kindly helped scam the church who refused to sell it to the Hare Krishnas, but would sell it to an Indian cultural center. So we got the contract written that, okay, we're selling it to we are purchasing this building, we or anyone we assign it to. And somehow the church overlooked that, that clause. So after the deed was signed, then they signed it over to Hare Krishna. So anyway, my point is that after some time, the young single men and women wanted to become grihastas. And when they became grihastas, like my wife and I, were not very well prepared for it. And so that would sometimes cause a loss of faith. That I've given all these years to helping this movement and helping it start, but then when I want to be independent, the temple kind of says, okay, thanks a lot, see you later. They really couldn't do anything for us. We all of a sudden had to make up for all this lost time. So not everyone, but in some cases this caused some loss of faith or loss of enthusiasm. So Srila Prabhupada, seeing this, said, okay, what we need is to have varnashram introduced for these devotees who are sincere devotees but need a simpler way of life because they haven't prepared to compete in this rat race of the material world. So he was very interested in establishing farms so devotees could live on the farms, have minimal financial needs, and just grow their own food and create their own environment and raise their children. And he was very hopeful this could take place. So it proved to be much more challenging than expected. For one thing, the climate is so different in the West. You know, having a farm project in an environment where you can only have 3 or 4 months of growing season definitely limits your options. Cows can survive and give milk year-round, but it really is quite challenging, especially for people who did not grow up that way and don't have those skills, you see. So the farm projects, some succeeded, some didn't. Some turned into ancillary types of rural projects, like for tourists to come and visit, like New Vrindavan, and they survived that way. But as far as self-sufficiency, growing your own food, which is very doable in an environment like India, where there are knowledgeable people and the climate is conducive year-round, is difficult. So again, forgive me if I'm sharing too much information about my life, but our last property my wife and I bought was an 8-acre farm that belonged to some devotees, and we bought it from some friends. So this is a whole new experience, 8 acres of land. So what do you do with all this land? It was covered with trees, so we cut down the trees during the pandemic and got some cows, and they're out grazing, and planted fruit trees, and many of which take decades to really, or some of which rather, like pecans, they take decades before they start producing. But trying to establish a family farm. And so I have found a lot of joy at this stage of my life. When I retired from management, I could just go out and do farming work, and it's almost ridiculous and silly, all the things I don't know how to do. But fortunately, there's no pressure to maintain ourselves, and so I can trial and error. Being too proud to farm is this interesting phrase, huh? Because farming is hard work, and that's one of the reasons, in addition to climate, why devotees did not achieve self-sufficiency on most of these varnashram projects, because it's hard work. It's hard work, and you have to know what you're doing, and it's very easy to work hard, and get nothing. So you have to be in a position to be, okay, well, let me start again and apply what I've learned and try and do it better next time. So being too proud to farm implies people, oh, I don't, I just buy my food at the grocery store, I don't need to grow. And therefore, to such people, the rainy season is merely an inconvenience. But for the farmer, and believe me, I've experienced this in Florida, we have sometimes 6 or 8 weeks with no rain, and it's a real challenge to try to keep your little crops alive. You have to really keep on top of it. But when the rain comes, it's like, oh, all right, now we can relax. And in the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the reign, R-E-I-G-N, of Maharaj Yudhisthira, it would only rain at night. So all day it would be sunny and bright, and then the crops would all get watered at night. So when we're in harmony with nature, that sort of thing is possible, but not these days. Okay, anything briefly? Okay, and then we'll just finish up this last 13th verse. We keep on schedule. Together, please. As all creatures of the land and water fall in rainwater, their forms became attractive and pleasing, just as the devotee becomes beautiful by engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord. Someone read the purport, please. Go ahead.
Srila Prabhupada comments as follows. We have practical experience of this with our students in International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Before becoming students, they were dirty looking. Although they had naturally beautiful personal features, but due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty and wretched. Since they have taken Krishna consciousness, their health has improved, and by their following the rules and regulations, their bodily luster has increased. Then they are dressed with saffron-colored clothes, with tilak on their forehead and beads in their hands, and on their necks they look, and beads on their hands and on their necks, they look exactly as if they have come directly from Vaikuntha.
Nice. Yeah. They do shave in Vaikuntha, right? So this is the same experience we have when, even if we water the crops, they survive, but when the rain comes, they flourish, because there's so much nitrogen in the rainwater, and they are brought to life. So it's a beautiful analogy of how people are brought to life by becoming devotees. Any comments? Has anyone experienced being brought to life by Krishna consciousness? Oh, you're all so beautiful. Even the ones who haven't shaven today. So, comments, thoughts? Damayanti?
I really like the point where you said that memorizing verses, they change like neural pathways in your brain. It's almost like you're reprogramming your brain.
Yes, it's arduous. It really takes a lot of repetition for most of us. But when you do it, they stay with you. These verses I know from the Gita I memorized when I was like 19 years old. 54 years ago. But they're still at my beck and call whenever I'm on a subject. So yeah, I really encourage you to do it now.
Also, I was thinking it from the perspective of the sound vibrations that they pick up. Because a lot of people in this world right now, they have a lot of different mental health problems. And because of that mental health problems, their brain has been really affected, or the things that they've started taking to deal with it. And so sometimes the doctor says there's no cure for it.
Yes.
And you cannot build that brain back up. But when we hear these things about chanting, researches is there, and on memorizing verses, now you just share, then it feels like there's hope around for people.
Yes, yes. You know, material life makes no sense, and therefore there's so much mental health issue, like you said. At the University of Florida, where we have our center, the Department of Mental Health Wellness, they call it student wellness, the leader was speaking with us and said that their calls for suicide have doubled over the last few years, and the cases of stress and anxiety are so prevalent that their counselors have no time to talk to the students anymore. They only have to monitor their medications for stress and anxiety. So there's no more time for cognitive therapy and discussion. And so they were trying to figure out the cause of it, and they found out, they concluded the cause is social media. Because people feel they have connection on social media. It's like eating junk food, but you don't really have the exchange that is required for a healthy mental state. So, Nityananda Prabhu, you had a question earlier. Do you remember what it was?
Oh my gosh, you were mentioning about the memorize shlokas as a duty, but I was thinking there's so many glorification of Krishna in Bhagavatam. How do we fall in love with those glorification and shlokas? So it's
Mm.
just so we can connect and we can, if that makes sense.
You tell me. I wish I could tell you. You know, love is the most powerful emotion. And so our goal in Krishna consciousness is to come to love Krishna. Because that love will motivate us far beyond anything that we could imagine. Guilt and fear and shame are no motivations for loving God. You can't shame your way into loving God or be shamed. It has to come from the joy of reciprocation with the Lord that we experience to one degree or another at different times. And like in kirtan, have you ever been in kirtan and you just feel like, now is this eternal moment, I just want to stay forever just like this, you know, and then the kirtan ends and it's time to wash the dishes or something. Rupa Goswami compares it to this. He says, if you try to describe love if you try to describe conjugal love to an immature child, they might get some concept, but they cannot understand what it is actually like to fall in love with somebody. But once you have fallen in love with somebody, then you immediately understand it. And you can never forget it. See, so falling in love with Krishna is our goal in Krishna consciousness. The things that are conducive for that we know: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Yeah. These 9 processes of bhakti are very favorable for developing that love. Hearing these glorifications of Krishna, just like you're saying, the sound vibration alone awakens that dormant love. Hearing in the association of devotees makes it more powerful because others are sharing the same experience. And it kind of reaffirms our experience to see others, to see the impact that the holy name or the Bhagavatam have on others as well. So it takes time. It takes time. However, the journey is blissful. Even we read the Bhajans of Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Artam Das Thakur, they're lamenting, I have no love for Krishna. Golokera Premadana Harinama Sankirtana. The holy name is descended from Goloka Vrindavan. How unfortunate that I have no attraction for it. Artam says. So it's existentially okay to be in this position where we're trying to love Krishna, we want to love Krishna, and we're not feeling any love for Krishna. Does that mean the process doesn't work? No, it just means that we have not quite made up our mind entirely that that's what we want out of life. So, and that's all right. It takes, be patient with ourselves. Because we have, you know, Krishna consciousness is like taking off in an airplane. When you first get in, you feel the G's, you feel the acceleration, right? But when you hit cruising altitude, it seems like you're just standing still, right? So when we first take it up, there's a lot of relief from material distress that we experience. But then we get a little familiar and we might get a little complacent. Okay, well, I've got that down. Now, you know, what else? and this is a period of, they call the clearing stage, where the unwanted habits are removed, but very slowly and surgically. Like Krishna will give us incredibly painful experiences to get rid of a certain anartha. Just like we go to the dentist knowing it's going to hurt, but it's going to hurt less than it would if we left the tooth to rot. Right? Prabhu?
Like you mentioned, everybody's discussing about loving the recitation of verses. With me, I've never been able to develop love. I love purports, I love translations, I love implementing them practically in life, and getting more into philosophy and getting analytical as well and attaching emotions to them. But remembering those verses, I'm like, I never prioritized them.
It's like learning a new language, if you just, especially Bhagavad Gita. That's why we emphasize the Gita, because it has a relatively simple vocabulary. And words you learn from one verse, you'll see in other verses that you already know. So but I know some very advanced devotees, highly accomplished devotees they just don't do Sanskrit. So it's not our measure of advancement in Krishna consciousness. Okay, you remember like the illiterate Brahmin that Lord Chaitanya met. He was reading Bhagavad Gita because his guru said to read it, but he was holding it upside down, and everybody was laughing at him. But he was crying, and Lord Chaitanya said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "When I can't read a word, but when I think of how Krishna drove the chariot for his devotee, I've just become so moved. It makes me cry." So Lord Chaitanya said, "You are the actual knower of the Bhagavad Gita." So if that's your propensity, Prabhu, it's not a big deal. It's hard work to memorize a verse. It's a pain in the neck. And you just have to do it over and over and over and over again until you finally get it. But well, just like we sing the Guru Vastakam in the morning. Do you know that by heart?
Guru Ashtakam, since we kind of do it almost every day, so yes, to an extent.
So I rest my case. It's the same thing. You can learn. You do have the capacity to learn. Repetition is the key. And actually the synonyms are the key. You understand the meaning of each word as far as possible. That helps you memorize, because then you can know what you want to say and how to say it in this language. Okay? All right. I think we're about out of time. All right. Thank you very much for coming. I did want to say tomorrow morning, I think you had mentioned you're going to have the morning program when it's usually the day off, so that I could be around you. But then my attendance at the morning program has been rather poor because of my jet lag. So I would like to suggest